I started to rake this up last fall, and when I lifted up some of the birch bark that was here, there was a little wee purple colored newt that some of them live around here, and he was under that birch bark, and he had just sort of dug himself in for the winter. So I didn't disturb him. I put that cover back over him and some cardboard, and it looks like he's moved on now in spring, so now I can carry on, finish what I was doing. This retaining wall that I'm building, this is actually part of the garden, but I've sectioned off this bit here. I'm going to be doing so much sawmilling and everything this year that I decided that I would still plant, of course, but not quite as much as I normally did. So I've sectioned off this part of the garden, and I've got a couple pigs coming. Little feeder pigs. So I'm going to put them in here, let them root around and do all their plowing and composting for me, and then next year it'll be really rich and ready to go. So this retaining wall, I keep bringing in more soil as I get it, and I'm building this up, and I'm going to keep building it up till it's roughly level. There's about probably about a 3.5 foot drop here. So I'm just going to keep building this up, and then I'm going to run a bit of an electric wire around here to keep the little pigs in, and that'll be that. So as you can see here, when the plow came through here in the winter moving the snow, he took a wide swath, cut kind of deep, and he's torn up some of the ground that was here, all moss and just natural forest debris, and it's all along. And this driveway of mine this road is a little over half a mile, and as you can see, it's all along here. So what I've been doing is shoveling it up, as you probably just saw. The beauty of this stuff is all the organic matter that's in it. Now it's pretty coarse, as you also saw, but that's beautiful because where I was putting those logs and all that heavy brush a few minutes ago, and it looks like a jumbled mess, that's real hugelkultur, because all of this stuff, and you can see it's got all kinds of debris in it. There's moss, bits of grass, all kinds of stuff in there. Even bits of wood from half deteriorated branches and roots and whatever. And the beauty of that is when it goes on top of all of that, and I'll show you, I've already done quite a bit. When it goes on top of all those logs and branches and brush and crap, those logs, even though they're big, will deteriorate. The good thing is they deteriorate slowly, probably over the course of several years, 10, 15 years maybe. So that's good, because what it means is it's going to continue to feed and compost that portion of the garden from deep into the soil. So the good thing about that kind of hugelkultur type composting is that compost piles need to be damp in order to function. Not soaking wet, but they need to be damp, like a kind of a wrung out sponge kind of thing. And they get that mostly from the rain, or if you're in a drier spot, you may have to actually water them. But what happens is that some of the nutrients leach out through the compost, as it should, but it leaches into the ground underneath. And, you know, potentially that's lost. With the hugelkultur, all that leaching is happening in the garden. So any of that leaching that goes into the soil goes directly into an area where you're planting. So you don't lose anything. You could do entirely hugelkultur without actually having a compost pile. Now I have 3 conventional compost piles. I'm not going to give that up because I can get lots of compost to top dress with. And I'll show you that. I just build them mostly out of logs. One is built with pallets. Oops, that's a little hard. But either way, the more of this nutrient, microorganisms, and all that good stuff that you can put back into your soil. Look at the color of that. Look at how black that is. Here, let's move over here. Look at how black that soil is. That's beautiful. Rich. That stuff's been composting for 1,000 years. So here we are back at the retaining wall area that I'm building up. Now the branches are up and sticking out all over the place. So before I put the last layers of soil on, and you can see I've started over here already, and I've probably got 1.5 feet of soil in this area here, and it's approximately, what, 3.5 feet wide, and it's probably 18 to 20 inches deep there so far. But it's still, even that top log that I just put on right here is still below grade. So, you know, I've got to keep working my way up, but you know, it doesn't have to happen all in one year. The beauty of this is you just keep building and building. Now, you know, I'm not 20 years old, so I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get it productive, but it'll be usable pretty soon. So on top of all this mess here, I start to pile on all this beautiful black soil with all this stuff in it here, moss and bits of twigs and all kinds of good nutritious stuff. And that's all going to start to compost down, and pretty soon that'll start to break down, and it slowly over the years will sink a little bit. That's fine, because over the years you'll just keep adding a little bit more soil to it as it needs it. So I also have this compost pile. This is a sort of 4x8 kind of thing, or 4x7 I guess. Obviously made out of pallets, and it's a bit unsightly. It's right along the driveway, but it was quick and I was bringing in a lot of material. So it was convenient just to be able to drive up, stop beside it, and unload. So this, I'll probably keep this for a while. I'm probably going to take some sawmill boards and I'll make a nicer looking enclosure for it. You don't have to have an enclosure, but it does help keep things tidier. Now over here, I have the beginnings of another compost, 2 of them actually, that will be log cabin style. You don't have to notch them or anything. The weight of the material that goes in it will hold it in place. So as you pile it up there, you just keep putting your logs, just like a log cabin, all the way around. And the beauty of it is, as you fill one up, for example, and it gets full and it's ready to flip, turn it, you can just take the top few logs off and flip it into the next side, using the logs you took off from this one to slowly build up the sides of this one as you need, until eventually this one is down and this one is full, and you know, you just keep going. The beauty of this type of material is that once you've got it broken down real nicely, it's very fine, nice and crumbly, and a real loamy soil type thing. And when you're putting it in where your vegetables are going to grow as a top layer, you don't want that rough, coarse stuff that we were just digging up. That's a little too tough for the little roots of your plants to be put into that stuff. So when I make this topsoil, once the garden's established, then year after year I can keep topping it with this really good, rich nutrient stuff. But it's, well, it shouldn't actually have the birch bark in it, but as you can see, that's a whole lot finer already than, look at that, a lot finer already than what it was when I put it in there in the fall. What we do have here by the compost pile is a little wee tree frog. There we go. It's going to take an awful lot of loads in this little trailer to, good gracious, to do what I'm doing, but it's convenient. I can just use the four-wheeler to tow it. The big trailer, by the time I load it up, it would be a bit too heavy for this machine, for the four-wheeler to tow. It would probably hold close to a ton, easily, especially since this is sort of damp. And this machine's only rated to tow about 800 pounds, so. But anyways, we'll just keep moving on. So I've been talking about hugelkultur, mosquitoes, hugelkultur, no-till gardening, and all the benefits of that kind of thing. You might wonder about Big Red here. This is a commercial wheel horse rear tine tiller. It's a brute. It's not a rental, it's mine. The reason I have this, and I'll show you here in a moment, I'll put a real quick clip in here. This whole area here is extremely dense clay. It gets wet and it just puddles up, and as soon as it dries, it goes hard as a rock, and if it dries out, it cracks just like broken cement. And I don't think you could grow much of anything. All you get is like, poplars, aspens, spruce, and they can't even penetrate into the ground. And I could show you a dozen places, hundreds of places, where the tree roots go down maybe 1.5 feet and they can't get through the clay, so they spread out into a great big plate, and the wind comes along, and because they haven't got a taproot, it can blow the whole tree over, and I can show you pictures of that. And that's not even all that uncommon in big wind. So the first time I'm starting a new garden, I run this tiller. I do it just simply because you have to break up that clay and get some nutrients in it. So what I'll do is I'll top dress it. I'll break up the clay sometimes with a spade. It's so hard. Even this big machine can't always break it up. Then I'll top dress it with maybe a ton of manure. Well composted horse manure is what I get. And then I'll till it so that I'll till it 3 or 4 times, maybe each day for a week sort of thing, till I really get that crumbled up and mixed in thoroughly. And that gives me the base down into the ground, probably 8, maybe 10 inches. And then that's it for that garden. I usually won't till it probably ever again. And from that point forward, I just keep raising it up slightly each year by adding a couple inches of compost, topsoil if I can get some nice topsoil like that black stuff I was just showing you, but without all the muck in it, the branches and roots and everything. But that stuff could easily be composted, and in a year or so, even those coarse bits of roots and that would be amazing soil, because you saw it, black as anything. I also don't use any non-organic, in fact I don't use any commercial fertilizers of any kind. The only stuff I put in my gardens basically are various different composts essentially. Nature has been composting since the beginning of time. It's nothing new. We didn't invent this stuff. The only thing that people can do is 2 things we can do that probably, I hate to use the word improves on nature, but at any rate, when nature composts like any given area, it's only adding to that forest floor whatever trees and branches and leaves and so on are available right there, and a little bit that the wind might blow in. So it's kind of almost a monoculture of compost, if you will. And wherever you are, you're going to get a different mix, but each area will be whatever it is. As composters ourselves, we can bring in materials from all over the place and adding them all together and get a huge variety that you don't normally get in nature. So one huge advantage of our composting is that we can do this. The second thing that we do is by turning it and moving it around and putting in vast quantities of it, piling it up high with lots of nitrogen in it so it heats up really good. We can generate compost, we can generate a ton of compost in one summer. An area 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet high, which is, you know, similar to what I showed you there with that pallet compost area. It's a little bit bigger. You can make over a ton of compost in that small area right there in a summer. So that's the second thing that we can do that, as I said, I don't know if it improves it, but it kind of enhances our ability to use it quickly. And God forbid people want things quickly. So the explanation for this is, if you haven't already seen me use it, you will. That's why, because I have to break down through that clay. I darn near need to get a bulldozer or a backhoe in here to dig down and break it up, because it's just solid. And I'll take you over here, you know, where I was doing some of the digging in the retaining wall area there, and I'll show you a hole I started to dig. I was going to put a pole up in there for my solar panels, and it just you'd have to bring a machine in with an auger, or like a big power auger, and you know, on the back of a tractor or something, and I'm just not going to do that. I'll find another way. So that explains this. You'll see it, I'm sure, one day working. And come on, let's go and I'll show you just what I mean about all that clay. So as you can see, about this distance here, maybe, well, I can span about 9 inches with my hand, so maybe a little bit less than 9 inches is poor dirt, sort of, a lot of clay in it. Then when you get down to this level here, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it turns very gray, and then as it goes down further, it gets lighter gray, and it just keeps going, and it just doesn't quit. This hole is maybe 2 feet deep, maybe a little bit more. And it just keeps going. There's just no end to it. So you're not going to grow a whole lot in that. That's just going to have to be worked, or else, you know, I'm going to have real poor produce out of this area. So by tilling it down, you know, that 8 or 10 inches, maybe just below this sort of half-assed soil, and by adding in a whole lot more amendments, I can actually make this into a pretty good garden. It won't happen in the first year. But the first year it will grow crops for sure, and each year afterwards, as I keep adding the finer compost on top, it will just continue to improve. And that's the beauty of it. We're not taking out of the soil and depleting it. By gardening and doing it properly, we're actually adding to the quality of the soil, the health of it. So one of the points that I'm making when I said about adding to the nutrition and the quality of the soil, by using chemical fertilizers, they are exactly that. They're chemicals. Unless you do a soil test for starts, you don't really know if your soil needs more phosphorus, more nitrogen, more potash, or any of those things. So you really need to get or do a soil test yourself. I use those kits that you can buy. They're not as accurate by any means as what you would get from you know, sending it out to a university. So by getting that tested, you have a better idea of what you really need to do. But no matter what you do with chemical fertilizers, all you're adding in is chemicals. Chances are pretty good that those chemicals probably won't be as usable by the plants. It's like vitamins for people. You can get vitamins that are poor quality vitamins, cheap ones, and they may have the content of the given vitamin that they call for, but it could be made from in a format that's not as digestible to the human, so you don't really absorb the full content of what you're supposed to be getting. Whereas a better quality vitamin made from a better material that produces that same vitamin content, but is also more digestible, you're going to get far more benefit from that. It's the very same with the soil. By adding in compost, not only are you adding in with some control, of course, depending on what you add into your compost pile, but you're adding in all the organic matter, and you're not killing the worms that are in there that are doing so much good. In 1 acre of well-managed garden, there will be 25 tons of worm castings per year. It's amazing, just absolutely amazing. And they are far more rich in usable plant material. They're probably as close to ideal, perfect humus for plant use as you'll ever get. And it's because nature made it, not some mankind person in a factory trying to make money by putting out something he can sell to us for 3 times what it's actually worth anyways. As you can tell, I'm probably not the person who's the biggest fan of actually much of anything man-made, to be honest with you. I like to do things myself. I like to do things from nature without damaging nature. I like to think that as I work around here, I'm actually adding to what's here. I may take a tree out because it's in the way or because it's diseased and it's going to fall down and possibly endanger my house or my vehicle or something. But generally speaking, I certainly hope that I'm enhancing the area. I'm giving back more than I'm using. And you'll never do that with chemical fertilizer. It's a lost cause. As those fertilizers get into your soil and they don't seem to be as functional, then you have to get a stronger fertilizer. And then in a few years, you've got to get a stronger one again. And that's the same thing by poisoning the soil with, pesticides and powders and all those sorts of things. You might kill off what you're trying to get, but some of them will survive, build up a resistance, and a couple of years from now, you're going to have to get a stronger one. In the meantime, you've killed all the microbes and microorganisms and worms and birds that eat some of that stuff. All of those things, you're killing those off, and you're definitely not adding anything to nature by doing that. So my only suggestion, and it's only my personal feelings, of course, anything that you can do naturally, find a way to do it. It really is well worth it. But it's still occasionally getting down around 0 degrees at night, 10 degrees, that's in Fahrenheit, 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. It's still too cold to put my plants out. I have started most of them in trays, so hopefully, if not the next video, the one after that, now I'm going to put potatoes out. I'll put my seed potatoes out probably today or tomorrow probably, and so I'll show you a little bit about that. But in the meantime, keep gardening, try and give back more than you're using, and everybody have a great summer, great produce, and we'll see you all down the road.